My wife caressed her stomach and told him in perfect German, "Don't worry. The idiot is so happy about the pregnancy. He will raise your son thinking it's his." I calmly poured more wine and responded in fluent German, "I'm glad we're all here together. The name's Daniel Parker, 56 years old, and until that moment at Heinrich's restaurant, I thought I knew exactly who I was married to. I should have seen it coming. In my 56 years, including 4 years in the Army back in the 80s and 30 years as an electrical engineer, I'd learned that when something seems too good to be true, it usually is. But Amanda had a way of making me forget the hard lessons I'd picked up during my first marriage and my military service. She could make me feel like the luckiest guy alive, even though I was pushing retirement age and she was 10 years younger. The dinner invitation should have been my first red flag. In our 5 years of marriage, Amanda had never once suggested I meet Frederick Richter, her boss at International Holdings Corp. She always said mixing business with personal life was inappropriate. Yet there I was, sitting across from them at the city's most expensive German restaurant, watching my wife laugh at his jokes with an intimacy that made my engineering mind start calculating probabilities I didn't want to consider. Heinrich's was exactly Amanda's style. Expensive, exclusive, the kind of place where a single meal cost more than most people spent on groceries in a week. Frederick had chosen it, naturally. He was the type who always had to control the situation, had to display his wealth. At 48, he was impeccably dressed in what I recognized as a $4,000 suit, silver hair slicked back with that European sophistication that probably impressed younger women. His slight German accent was something he wore like a badge of honor. I sat there in my department store blazer, feeling distinctly outclassed. As a senior electrical engineer pulling down $180,000 a year, I'd done well, enough to pay off my mortgage and build a decent retirement fund. But in this crowd, I might as well have been delivering pizzas. My first marriage had taught me about financial vulnerability, and my Army training had taught me about situational awareness. Both were sending up warning signals. The conversation flowed too easily between them. They shared inside jokes, discussed colleagues I'd never heard Amanda mention, and spoke about projects with the kind of intimacy that comes from spending way too much time together. I watched Amanda's face light up when she looked at him, an expression I hadn't seen directed at me in months. I tried to participate, asking polite questions about their work, but every attempt felt forced. They would pause, include me just enough to be polite, then dive back into their private world. I was a third wheel at my own wife's dinner, an uncomfortable observer to an intimacy I was beginning to recognize wasn't entirely professional. Amanda looked radiant that night. She'd spent hours at the salon getting her blonde hair styled perfectly, and her makeup was flawless. Her dress was a deep emerald number I'd never seen before, probably cost more than my car payment. She was glowing the way pregnant women are supposed to glow, her hand occasionally drifting to the small bump that was just starting to show. The pregnancy had been announced 3 months earlier with tears of joy and promises of the perfect family we'd build together. At 56, after my first marriage ended badly when I was 30, I'd given up on having more kids. My son Andrew from that first marriage was 26 now, doing well in IT support, but I'd figured my chance at being a hands-on father again was over. Then suddenly, there was this gift, this second chance at the family I'd always wanted. But the timeline had always bothered me, even though I'd pushed those doubts aside. Amanda had announced the pregnancy right after returning from a business trip to Munich, the same trip where she'd worked closely with Frederick on a major acquisition. When I questioned the dates, she'd been dismissive, telling me I worried too much about details. My military training had taught me to pay attention to details that didn't add up, but I'd ignored my instincts. That's when they started speaking German. It began innocuously enough. Frederick commented on the wine selection, something about the Rhineland region it came from. Amanda responded fluently, her pronunciation smooth and confident. I'd known she spoke some German from college, but I'd never heard her speak it with such ease, such comfort. As their conversation shifted entirely into German, they didn't even try to include me. They didn't pause to translate or explain. I just sat there smiling like the fool they clearly thought I was. What they didn't know was that my grandmother Helen had been German, immigrated here as a young woman but never lost her language or culture. She'd insisted on teaching me German as a kid, making me spend summers with her practicing until I was completely fluent. It was one of my few secrets, something I'd never shared with anyone, not even Amanda. I listened to every word as Frederick told my wife how proud he was of her performance with me, how convincing she was as the devoted wife. Amanda laughed, a sound like breaking glass, and told him how easy it was to fool me, how trusting I was, how naive. The German word she used was einfältig, simple-minded, gullible, stupid. Then Frederick leaned closer and asked about my reaction to the pregnancy news, whether I had suspected anything. Amanda shook her head and caressed her stomach in what I'd thought was maternal instinct, but now recognized as something else entirely. "Don't worry," she said in German, her voice filled with cruel amusement. "The idiot is so happy about the pregnancy. He will raise your son thinking it's his." The world stopped. Everything around me seemed to freeze as those words echoed in my mind. Your Vortor, son, not our son. Your son. I sat there, my face still wearing that same trusting smile as my entire life collapsed around me. 5 years of marriage reduced to a performance, 3 months of joy about becoming a father again revealed as the cruelest joke imaginable. Every tender moment, every shared dream, every promise of forever. Nothing but lies crafted by a woman who saw me as nothing more than a fool to be manipulated. Frederick reached across the table and squeezed her hand, their fingers intertwining in a gesture so intimate it made me physically ill. He told her how much he loved her, how excited he was about their child, how perfectly everything was working out according to their plan. They had been planning this for months, he said. The pregnancy, the timing, even this dinner was all part of their elaborate deception. I watched my wife, the mother of the child I had been preparing to love with every fiber of my being, nod and smile as her lover praised her for her ability to lie. To my face. She was good at it, he said. A natural actress. She could make me believe anything. My military training kicked in then. That cold analytical state we called tactical thinking, where emotion gets compartmentalized and you focus on the mission. Right now, my mission was getting through this dinner without revealing what I knew until I could plan my next move properly. I calmly reached for the wine bottle and poured myself a generous glass. Then I raised it slightly and looked directly into Frederick's surprised eyes. "Prost," I said clearly in German. "To new beginnings and the end of illusions." The color drained from Amanda's face so quickly I thought she might faint. Frederick's mouth fell open, his confident smile crumbling into something approaching terror. The silence that followed was deafening. "Daniel," Frederick stammered, his accent thicker now, more pronounced. "I think perhaps there has been some misunderstanding." "Oh, I don't think there's any misunderstanding at all. Frederick," I replied in English, keeping my voice conversational, almost friendly. I understood perfectly. Every word. Amanda finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Daniel, baby, you don't speak German. You're confused. Frederick was just telling me about his family. Even caught red-handed, she was still lying, still trying to gaslight me. The woman who'd shared my bed for 5 years was looking directly into my eyes and lying without a moment's hesitation." "Your German is quite good, Amanda," I said, maintaining that conversational tone. "Especially that part about me being simple-minded enough to raise another man's son thinking it was mine. Your pronunciation of einfältig was particularly impressive. She went completely white. Frederick leaned forward, his voice urgent now, all pretense abandoned. Daniel, listen to me. This is not what you think. Amanda and we work together, yes, but this tonight was just business discussion. I almost laughed. Here was a man who had just heard his lover discuss their plan to trick me into raising his child, and he was still trying to convince me it was business. I stood up slowly, my movements deliberate and controlled, the same way I approached everything in my work as an engineer. Frederick, I believe you'll be taking care of the check tonight. Seems like the least you can do. Amanda reached across the table, trying to find my hand. I pulled away before she could touch me. Daniel, please, she said, tears starting to form. You have to let me explain. You don't understand what you heard. Even now, even caught in the most obvious lie imaginable, she was still trying to make me doubt what I had heard with my own ears, what I had understood with perfect clarity. In the Army, we called this psychological warfare, making the enemy doubt their own perceptions. Where are you going? She called out as I started to walk away, loud enough that other diners turned to look. We're married. We have to work this out. I turned back to look at her one last time. No, Amanda, we don't have to work anything out. You made your choice when you decided to trick me into raising your lover's child. Some things can't be fixed. I drove around the city for 2 hours after leaving the restaurant, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The tactical thinking was wearing off, and the emotional impact was hitting me in waves. I wasn't ready to go home yet, wasn't ready to face the physical reminders of a marriage that had been nothing but an elaborate performance. Instead, I found myself parked outside a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of town, nursing coffee that tasted like motor oil and trying to process what I'd learned. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh, unforgiving light that seemed appropriate for the moment. My phone had been buzzing constantly since I left the restaurant. 15 missed calls from Amanda, 8 text messages I couldn't bring myself to read. And surprisingly, 3 calls from Frederick. What could he possibly have to say? I needed advice from someone I could trust completely, someone who knew me well enough to help me think this through clearly. I finally called my son, Andrew. At 26, he was old enough to handle the truth, and I needed someone I could trust completely. Dad? It's midnight. Everything okay? Andrew, I need to tell you something, and I'm going to need your help. I told him everything. The dinner, the German conversation, the devastating revelation about the pregnancy. Andrew listened without interrupting, and when I finished, there was a long silence. Jesus, Dad. I'm sorry. What do you need me to do? I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with before I make any decisions. Can you come over tomorrow? I'm going to need your IT skills. When I got home that night, Amanda was waiting up, pacing in the living room, still wearing that expensive emerald dress. She tried her usual tactics. Tears, explanations, claims that I'd misunderstood. But I was done being manipulated. We'll talk when my lawyer is present, I told her calmly. Until then, I suggest you find somewhere else to stay. You can't throw me out of my own house? She protested. Actually, I can. The house is in my name only, paid off with money I earned before we met. Check the deed if you don't believe me. The next morning, Andrew arrived with his laptop and a grim expression. My boy had inherited my analytical mind, but combined it with technical skills that made my engineering background look primitive. All right, Dad, where do we start? He asked, setting up his equipment on my kitchen table. Financial records. Your stepmother has been managing our household expenses for years. I trusted her completely. I pulled out our bank statements and credit card bills. My Army training taught me to always verify intelligence before acting on it. Time to verify everything. What we found over the next 6 hours made my blood run cold. Over the past 18 months, there had been charges I'd never seen before. Expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, Hotel rooms in cities where Amanda claimed to be traveling alone for business. The amounts weren't huge individually, but they added up to nearly $8,000 in unexplained expenses. "Look at this pattern," Andrew said, pointing to his screen. "Every month, same upscale hotel downtown. Always Thursday afternoons, always followed by charges at expensive restaurants nearby." I cross-referenced the dates with Amanda's work calendar, which she kept on our shared computer. Every Thursday hotel charge corresponded with a notation that read, "Client meeting, Fr. Frederick Richter." "She was documenting her affair in our shared calendar," Andrew said with disgust, "probably thinking you'd never bother to look. The jewelry purchases were particularly devastating. We found receipts for a diamond tennis bracelet worth $3,000 purchased just 2 weeks after our 5th wedding anniversary. She'd told me it was a gift to herself for landing a big client. I'd been proud of her success. Now I realized it had probably been a gift from Frederick, purchased with money from our joint account." "Dad, there's something else," Andrew said, his voice tight. "Look at this email account she left logged in. The emails with Frederick went back 20 months, starting with work discussions but quickly evolving into something intimate. I read them chronologically, watching a professional relationship become seduction, then a full affair with detailed plans for their secret meetings. The pregnancy had been planned. Not just planned, but strategically timed. They had known about my business conference in Seattle weeks in advance, had used my travel schedule to ensure that conception would happen while I was 3,000 miles away. In one email, Amanda had joked about how excited I'd been when she told me she was ovulating right when I got back from my trip. They had been laughing at me, mocking my trust, my joy, my excitement about becoming a father again. "This is systematic fraud," Andrew said, "and conspiracy. Dad, you could have them both arrested." "Maybe. But I want something more permanent than jail time. My military training had taught me about strategic thinking. Sometimes the best victory isn't the obvious one. I need to make a phone call." I called Brian Walsh, a private investigator I'd worked with years earlier on a patent dispute case. Brian specialized in corporate investigations and understood how to turn information into leverage. "I need you to look into someone," I told him. "Someone who's been very careless about keeping secrets." Brian's investigation revealed that Frederick wasn't just cheating on his wife, Catherine. He was running multiple affairs and had several business ventures that existed in legal gray areas. Tax shelters that pushed boundaries, partnerships with companies that existed only on paper, import duties being avoided through creative paperwork. "This guy's got more exposure than a nudist colony," Brian reported back. "His business empire is built on financial quicksand. And his wife Catherine isn't just wealthy, she's connected. Old European money with ties to banks and government officials. According to Brian's research, Catherine had discovered Frederick's previous affairs and had quietly made each mistress disappear from his life through financial pressure and social ostracism. She didn't get mad. She got thorough. Frederick's been careful to keep this one hidden from her," Brian continued. "But secrets have a way of coming to light when the right person decides to illuminate them. That's when I made my decision. I would send Catherine carefully crafted information, photographs, financial records, hotel receipts. Nothing that could be traced back to me, just information that a concerned citizen thought she should have about her husband's activities." "You sure about this, Dad?" Andrew asked when I explained my plan. "Son, sometimes the best revenge is letting someone's own choices destroy them." I sent Catherine Richter the information on a Wednesday evening, using an anonymous email account Andrew had helped me set up. Nothing that could be traced back to me, just photographs of Frederick and Amanda together, financial records showing the hotel payments, and copies of their more incriminating email exchanges. Catherine responded faster than I'd expected. Within 12 hours, she had hired her own investigators to verify every detail. By Friday morning, Frederick's business accounts were frozen pending investigation into potential financial irregularities. Anonymous tips had reached the appropriate federal authorities about his creative accounting practices. My phone rang Saturday morning. It was Frederick, and he sounded desperate. "Daniel, we need to talk. There are things happening that you don't understand. Amanda and we can work something out. Maybe help with your retirement planning." "Frederick," I said calmly, "I think you have bigger problems to worry about than my retirement." The next 3 weeks moved like a carefully orchestrated military operation. Amanda discovered that continuing her deception required Frederick's backing, and Frederick was no longer in a position to back anyone. His carefully constructed world was collapsing piece by piece. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Amanda finally told the truth in court, not out of honesty, but because lying would have required resources she no longer had access to. She admitted the child wasn't mine and relinquished any claim to alimony or support. My lawyer was pleased with how quickly everything resolved once she stopped fighting. "Mr. Parker, I've rarely seen someone protect their assets so effectively during a fraud-based divorce," he told me. Frederick got 4 years in federal prison for tax evasion and business fraud. His company was liquidated to pay restitution, his assets seized, his reputation destroyed. Catherine divorced him while he awaited trial and made it clear through her lawyers that she wouldn't be visiting him in prison. Amanda moved in with her sister in Phoenix, working as a receptionist for $12 an hour and struggling with single motherhood. The last I heard, she was working 2 jobs just to afford a studio apartment. But the real victory wasn't in their downfall. It was in what I discovered about myself. 6 months later, I was having coffee at a neighborhood cafe when I met Grace Stevens. She was a psychology professor at the community college, 48 years old, grading papers and occasionally muttering about her students' work. We started talking, and I found myself telling her about Amanda. Not with bitterness, just the facts. "I see that sometimes in my classes," Grace said thoughtfully. "Students convinced they're failing because they can't understand the material, when really they're just dealing with professors who explain things poorly. Usually turns out the students aren't stupid at all, they're just getting bad information." Grace understood betrayal. She'd been divorced 3 years after discovering her ex-husband had been embezzling from his nonprofit employer. She knew about the long process of learning to trust your own judgment again after someone systematically undermined it. We've been seeing each other for 8 months now. Nothing rushed, nothing desperate, just 2 people who've learned the value of honesty building something real together. She has a teenage daughter from her first marriage, and the 3 of us have started doing weekend activities together. It feels natural, comfortable, genuine. Andrew and I are closer than we've ever been. Going through that crisis together taught us both about trust, about protecting what matters, about standing up when someone tries to use your good nature against you. He calls every Sunday now, and we talk about everything. His work, his girlfriend, his plans for the future. "Dad," he told me, "recently, watching you handle that whole situation taught me more about being a man than anything else ever could. You didn't just get mad. You got smart. My retirement fund is intact, my house is paid off, and I'm looking forward to the future. I've started doing some consulting work, helping younger engineers navigate both technical challenges and workplace politics. There's something satisfying about passing on hard-earned wisdom. Grace and I talk about traveling when I fully retire, maybe visiting Germany to see the places my grandmother came from. It would be fitting to use the language that revealed the truth to explore something positive for a change. Amanda and Frederick thought they could manipulate an older engineer who was desperate for love and family. They believed that my age and desire for stability made me an easy target. They learned that some people should never be underestimated, and some hearts should never be broken for sport. The German word for what I found is Befreiung, liberation. Liberation from lies, from manipulation, from the exhausting work of trying to make sense of someone else's deception. Sometimes life's greatest betrayals become unexpected doorways to freedom. Looking back, I realized that discovering the truth about Amanda wasn't just about ending a bad marriage. It was about reclaiming my ability to trust my own instincts. My military training had taught me to gather intelligence and verify information, but somewhere along the way, I'd stopped applying those skills to my personal life. The moment I heard that German conversation was the moment I remembered who I really was. A man capable of protecting himself and the people he cared about. The most valuable lesson wasn't about revenge or justice. It was learning that authentic love, like the relationship I'm building with Grace, feels completely different from manipulation disguised as affection. When someone truly cares about you, you don't spend your time questioning your own perceptions or making excuses for their behavior.